Hi, this is Jenny Kassan. I'm here to lay down the law for you on how to raise money for your business. Last week, I came on and talked about why it's actually way better to have a larger number of smaller investors than just one or two big investors. There's many reasons for that. I went over last week, and also I talked about how you can manage that so it doesn't become a difficult thing to have a larger number of investors. I believe it's much easier to have a larger number of small investors than one or two big investors, because they tend to not really have the desire to, get super involved, bother you all the time, want control, that sort of thing. And there are ways that you can manage having a large number of investors. So when I've raised money, sometimes I've had like 20 investors. Sometimes the most I've ever had was 140 in one raise. And it is manageable, and it makes it possible for you to stay in control of your business, and it's easier for people to say yes. So you don't have to be one of those entrepreneurs that has hundreds and hundreds of meetings and raises no money, because you're looking for that one yes from someone who's going to do like several $100,000. If you set your minimum lower and you're willing to accept a larger number of smaller checks, more people can say yes. So I created a little tool that you can use to really plan out your raise so that you can get it done in a reasonable amount of time. And you can just make sure you don't drag it out forever, because that is one thing that I've seen. I've done it myself, where I've gone out to raise money and I would kind of take breaks and take several weeks off and then start again. And I had lost momentum. And then before I knew it, it had taken me, the first time I raised money, it took me a full year to raise 150,000, and that shouldn't have been the case. So really I call it ripping off the Band-Aid, just get it done, put some real energy towards it in a limited amount of time, get it done, and then you can go back to running your business, and now you'll have the resources to do what you really want to do in your business. So this is a tool that I recommend you try to prepare for your raise. So first of all, you want to figure out how much you want to raise. There's a whole bunch of exercises I could share about how do you even figure that number out. But let's say you pretty much decided, yeah, I think I need to raise about 200,000. That doesn't mean it has to be set in stone. You may end up changing that number, but let's say, you've done some projections, you've thought about what you need to do to make your business what you want it to be, and you're like, I could really do that with 200,000. Then you want to think about, how much do I think each investor is likely to put in? And of course, that's going to really vary a lot. It depends somewhat on how you're raising money. If you go ahead and do an investment crowdfunding campaign, the per investor amount is going to be lower. You're going to have a much larger number of smaller investors. Whereas if you're doing a private offering, the average is likely going to be higher. So let's just say, for example, you're doing a private offering, and you're definitely hoping to get some checks for 50,000, even 100,000, but you think that the average per investor, and let's say you really don't even want to accept a check for less than 5,000. So let's say the average is, you estimate the average is going to be about 10,000. Hopefully it'll be higher than that, but you want to be on the conservative side. So let's say you decide, okay, I think the average per investor will be 10,000. So then the next thing you want to do is divide the total amount you're raising by the average that you predict. So in this case, it would be, you want to raise 200,000, you expect it'll be an average of 10,000 per investor. That means you'll end up with about 20 investors total. Now, like I said, it may end up being less, it may end up being more, but that's kind of a guess as to how many total investors you'll have. So then the next thing you want to do is multiply that number by 10. And that is the number that I estimate that you might have to have contact with to actually reach your goal. I think it is on the conservative side because it's assuming that only 1 out of 10 people you talk to will say yes. And that the average will be, maybe a little on the lower side, but it's a fairly conservative estimate. So I'm going to need 20 investors total. I'm going to have to talk to 200 to get to my goal. Again, that might be conservative, but it's always better to err on the side of more conservative. So, okay, I have to talk to 200 people to get to my goal. How long do I want to take to get to my goal? Well, I would really like to take no more than 4 months. So let's say 16 weeks. So I divide that 200 by 16 weeks, and that tells me the number of people I need to have contact with per week. So in that case, 200 divided by 16, that's about 12 to 13 contacts with potential investors per week. So now what does that even mean in terms of contacts? Because sometimes you'll have a contact or a conversation, an exchange with a potential investor, and it may not be the only conversation you have. Sometimes people won't make a decision on the spot whether to invest or not. But basically, you want to have a meaningful connection with a potential investor. You want to do that at least 12 to 13 times per week. And you want to schedule that into your calendar, because what I find is that often when you're raising money, the rest of the world does not stop. You have a million other things you want to do. But if you plan ahead and say, okay, I'm really going to take the time, maybe it's going to be about 15 hours a week to make sure I have at least 12 to 13 meaningful conversations or contacts or connections with investors. That way, then you're way more likely to get it done and actually finish it in 16 weeks. So based on my experience, I've done it too many times where I haven't done it that way, and I kind of took longer than I really had to. So I would highly recommend that you do it this way. You may surprise yourself and do it faster than you thought, because I do think these numbers are pretty conservative. And, it turns out often that, in the beginning, it's a little harder than towards the end. It's a little hard sometimes to get going, to get momentum, to get comfortable with what you're saying to investors. But as you start going and you start getting more confident and comfortable having those conversations, and you start getting some yeses, that makes it so much easier, because once you get your first yes, you can start telling other people, oh yeah, I've already gotten my first, 20,000 or whatever. So I highly recommend doing it this way. Get it done. And of course, as an attorney, I do have to say, you don't want to do any of this until you've made sure that you have the proper legal compliance in place. We have state and federal securities laws that regulate how you're allowed to talk to investors, what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed, whether you might have to do a filing before you talk to anyone. So those things you definitely want to have in place first. But this is a great way to just get yourself on track to raise that money fairly quickly. So I hope this was helpful. And I just want to share that I do have a bunch of tools on my website about these topics. We've written a lot of great blog posts that have really concrete examples and details and tips for how you can actually raise money for your business and do it fairly quickly and painlessly. So I definitely recommend you go check out my website, jennykassan.com. And while you're over there, go ahead and sign up for my newsletter. And that way you'll get to hear all the things that are happening. We have lots of cool events and resources so that you can really, learn about all the latest cool tools that are available when you want to raise money in a way that's a little bit outside the box. That's what I love to help people do. Good luck with your raising. Bye.